There are particular challenges facing anyone trying to write a biography of an early modern writer. If you're talking about a writer who's lived more recently, you've often got a wealth of information, letters, diaries, interactions with other people, all sorts of records of what they've done. These things often don't survive for early modern people, particularly those below a certain strata. There are, I think it's a third of paintings in galleries are not attributable to particular people, which is incredible given the money that was spent on these, and gives you some sign of how careless people were with life records in the 16th and early 17th centuries. You don't often have personal letters, you don't have anything outside the people's works themselves to tell you what's actually there, which is why you end up with some very strange conspiracy theories about gaps in people's lives. But this is quite normal. We don't know when a lot of people were born, we don't know who their parents were often, we don't know that much about their married lives, we don't know when they died, we don't know the exact circumstances in which they wrote a lot of things. So you have to work with that, and often there's years when, as in my case writing about Edmund Spenser, the subject disappears from the radar for large periods of time, or you just find one or two records about them. What you have to do is contextualise, work out what sort of lives people would have led, what you could have expected someone in that particular position, in this case someone who was a secretary in Ireland, someone who's educated at Cambridge, someone who wanted to write a lot, someone who ended up with a big estate. You have to think about exactly how those lives would have been. Spenser ends up on the Munster plantation in Ireland, about which not that much is known, and you have to think about what life would have been like for him and his family there. Isolated, would they have gone to church? Would they have gone to, would his children have gone to school? Would they have had a series of servants, or what? What interactions would they have had with Irish people? Spenser's known for his intolerance of the Irish, yet both his sons seem to have married Irish women and became Catholic, which suggests a much closer relationship than you would expect given the writings which suggest a separation of the two communities. Then you have to think, is the evidence skewed? Is he telling you things to put you off the scent or to put other people off the scent so that the reality is disguised? And you have to think through all those things. And that's before you get to the vexed question of how you read the life in terms of the works. Obviously that's a fraught area, and some people just think you shouldn't ever do this and you should take the works as something absolutely separate from the life. But when you're talking about somebody like Spenser, who does clearly signal at times that he's writing autobiographical passages in his writing, you have to think about that relationship to his life. Obviously, in many ways, he's controlling the bits of the evidence that he wants you to see. These are often related to his marriage, particularly the Amoretti and the Epithalamion celebration of his second marriage. In fact, he's the only poet in English who writes an epithalamion, a marriage hymn, about his own wedding. Usually they're written about somebody else's wedding, but Spenser writes one about his own wedding. How straight can you take that, that particular representation of the marriage in the writings? It's a difficult question. In the end, you have to use your judgment. You have to think about when he's telling you about things, whether those things might be true, and usually in his case there's no reason to doubt that they could be true. But it's not something you can ever think of scientifically. It's not something you can put aside your judgments and say, this doesn't relate to the life or this does relate to the life. The truth is it's a difficult paradox, a nettle that you have to grasp. If you tilt the evidence too much one way, you end up seeing the life absolutely everywhere in the works. If you tilt it the other way, you separate the two completely, which is surely also not right. And I think in the end, that's why the best biographies, I think, are written by people who know the particular period very, very well, who are not just thinking about biography, but are thinking about that period and how somebody lived in that period and how somebody could have lived in that period and what sort of things you might expect. And that's what I've tried to do in this biography of Spenser, is relate the two very, very carefully.